Kids can share the basement. They're young. They'll adapt, my mother-in-law, Amanda, announced with a dismissive wave of her hand. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my children's bedrooms, now transformed into a luxury spa complete with massage tables, aromatherapy diffusers, and meditation cushions. The scent of lavender couldn't mask the stench of their betrayal. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I never imagined I'd return from my uncle's funeral to find my in-laws had completely taken over my children's rooms. My 8-year-old daughter, Emma, and 10-year-old son, Jack, were huddled in the basement, their belongings piled in cardboard boxes, while their grandparents had turned their personal spaces into a wellness retreat. "We've been planning this for months," my father-in-law, George, chimed in, adjusting the bamboo privacy screen they'd installed. "Amanda needs a proper space for her wellness business, and these rooms have the best natural light." I glanced at my husband, Mark, who stood awkwardly in the corner, avoiding my gaze. He'd always been weak when it came to standing up to his parents, but this was a new low. They'd moved in with us 6 months ago, claiming they needed a temporary place to stay while their house underwent renovations. I should have known better. "The basement isn't properly heated," I said calmly, though my hands were shaking, "and there's black mold down there. That's why we never finished it." Amanda rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. A little cold builds character. Besides, this is a business investment. Think of all the clients I can serve now." She gestured proudly to the expensive equipment they'd installed. "We've already booked our first wellness retreat for next weekend." I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, a text from Emma. "Mom, there's water dripping from the ceiling down here." Looking around the converted rooms, I noticed they'd installed plumbing for a therapeutic soaking tub, directly above where my children were supposed to sleep. The audacity was breathtaking. "Where did all this equipment come from?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Oh, we took out a small loan," George said casually. "Use the house as collateral. Mark signed off on it last week." I turned to my husband, who suddenly found his shoes fascinating. "You did what?" "Mom and Dad have a solid business plan," he mumbled. "And they promise to pay us back once the wellness center takes off." I walked over to my daughter's former desk, now converted into a reception area, and ran my finger along the surface. The desk where she'd done her homework, where we'd shared late-night talks about school and friends, was now covered in appointment books and new age wellness pamphlets. "And you didn't think to discuss this with me?" I kept my voice level, years of dealing with difficult clients in my legal practice coming in handy. "We knew you'd overreact," Amanda said, arranging crystals on a shelf that used to hold my son's science awards. "You're always so rigid about everything. This is an opportunity for the whole family." I smiled then, a small, knowing smile that made Amanda's expression falter slightly. They had no idea what was coming. What they didn't know was that 3 months ago, when I first noticed Amanda measuring the kids' rooms and making casual comments about how much space they had, I'd started preparing. As a real estate attorney, I knew exactly how to protect my family's interests. "The children's rooms need to be restored by tomorrow morning," I said quietly. Amanda laughed, a high, dismissive sound. "Or what?" "This is happening, Olivia. The sooner you accept it, the better. We've already invested thousands in this space." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a document I'd been carrying since the funeral. "This is interesting timing, actually. I just had this notarized yesterday." "What is that?" George asked, his voice losing some of its confidence. "When you moved in, I had you both sign some papers. Remember? The standard rental agreement for your temporary stay." I watched their faces carefully. "You might want to review paragraph 7. Amanda snatched the document from my hands, her eyes scanning the page. I saw the exact moment she found it. Her face went from smug to pale in seconds. This says we can be evicted with 24-hour notice if we make any unauthorized modifications to the property," she stammered. "Keep reading," I said softly. "And any improvements or installations become property of the homeowner, with no compensation required." George read over her shoulder, his voice growing faint. "You tricked us." Amanda's voice rose to a shriek. "No, I protected my children." "There's a difference." I turned to Mark, who finally met my eyes. "We need to talk. Privately." As I walked out of the room, I heard Amanda start to cry. The same manipulative tears she used countless times before. But this time, they wouldn't work. I had everything documented, everything in order. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Emma. Mom, Jack's asthma is getting worse down here. I typed back quickly. Pack your bags, sweetie. You're both staying at Aunt Sophie's tonight. This will be fixed by morning. The next 24 hours would change everything, and for once, I was the one in control. That evening, after dropping the kids at my sister Sophie's house, I sat across from Mark in our kitchen. The sound of Amanda's meditation music drifted down from upstairs, where she and George were pretending nothing was wrong. "They're your parents," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But those are our children's rooms. How could you sign off on a loan without telling me?" Mark ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit I'd seen too often lately. "They promised it was temporary. Said they'd pay it back once the business takes off. Mom's been dreaming about this wellness center for years. And our children's dreams don't matter." I pulled out my phone, showing him the photos Emma had sent of the water damage in the basement. "Your son's asthma is acting up. Your daughter is sleeping next to moldy walls. Also, your mother can have a spa." He flinched at the evidence but still tried to defend them. "Maybe we could figure something out. The kids could share the guest room." "Stop." I placed another document on the table. "This is what your parents' small loan actually looks like. They remortgaged our house for $175,000. Mark's face went pale as he read the numbers. That can't be right. They said it was just for basic equipment." "They lied. I pulled the records today. They've also applied for 3 more credit cards in your name." I watched his expression shift from denial to horror. "Your mother's previous wellness business in Florida? It went bankrupt, leaving her investors with nothing. Did you know that?" "How did you?" "I'm a lawyer, Mark. When your parents moved in, I did my homework. Something you should have done before signing anything." Just then, Amanda swept into the kitchen in her new silk wellness guru robe. Discussing our wonderful new business venture, she beamed, completely ignoring the tension in the room. "I've already got 5 clients booked for next week." I turned to her slowly. "Those appointments will need to be canceled." "Excuse me?" Her smile faltered. "You have exactly 18 hours to remove everything from my children's rooms and restore them to their original condition." Amanda laughed, but it sounded forced. "Don't be ridiculous. We've invested too much to back out now. Besides, the loan is already processed." "A loan that was obtained fraudulently," I said, pulling out another document. "This is a copy of the application. You forged my signature as co-owner of the house." "That's a felony, Amanda." The color drained from her face. "Mark signed for it." "Mark has no legal authority to approve a loan without my consent. Our house ownership agreement requires both signatures for any financial decisions." I stood up, my voice ice cold. "Would you like me to continue listing your legal violations?" "You ungrateful little." Amanda sputtered, her wellness guru facade cracking. "After everything we've done for this family. You mean like forcing my children into a moldy basement or secretly remortgaging our house? Or maybe you mean the 3 credit cards you applied for in Mark's name last week." George appeared in the doorway, having finally turned off his meditation music. "Now see here, Olivia, you're blowing this out of proportion." "No, I'm not." I turned to Mark. "Your choice is simple. Either your parents remove everything by tomorrow morning, or I file charges for fraud and elder financial abuse." "Elder abuse?" Amanda screeched. "I'm only 58. Using her adult child's identity for financial gain qualifies as elder abuse in this state." I explained calmly. "I should know. I handled 3 such cases last year." Mark finally found his voice. "Mom, Dad, is this true? Did you forge Olivia's signature? Take out credit cards in my name?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears, her signature move. "We were going to pay everything back once the business succeeds." "Like your last 3 businesses?" I asked. "The wellness center in Florida? The crystal healing clinic in Arizona? The meditation retreat in New Mexico? Should I continue?" George put his arm around Amanda's shoulders. "Now let's all calm down. I'm sure we can work something out." I shook my head. "No more working things out. No more manipulations. You have 18 hours. After that, I file charges and contact the mortgage fraud division." "You'd send us to jail?" Amanda wailed. "Your own family? You put my children in a moldy basement and stole their college fund through fraudulent loans," I replied. "You stopped being family the moment you chose your spa dreams over their well-being." I turned to Mark, who sat there looking shell-shocked. Tomorrow morning, I'm taking the kids to school. When we return, either their rooms are restored or I make the calls. Your choice. As I walked upstairs to pack an overnight bag, I heard Amanda's sobs and George's attempts to placate her. But more importantly, I heard Mark's voice, stronger than I'd ever heard it. Mom, Dad, I think you should start packing. The next morning, I pulled into our driveway with Emma and Jack after the school drop-off. A moving truck was parked outside, and men were carrying out massage tables and equipment. Mark stood on the porch, supervising the removal, while Amanda sat in her car, dabbing at her eyes with a crystal-infused handkerchief. They're really leaving? Emma asked, squeezing my hand. Yes, sweetie, your room will be yours again by tonight. Inside, the transformation was already underway. The bamboo screens were gone, and the aromatherapy diffusers were packed away. George was dismantling the plumbing they'd installed, muttering under his breath about ungrateful daughters-in-law. Mark approached me, looking both exhausted and relieved. I called the bank this morning, he said quietly. They're investigating the loan application. Mom and Dad will have to answer some questions. And the credit cards. Canceled. I've put a freeze on my credit. He ran his hand through his hair again. I can't believe they did this. Believe it, I replied, and remember it the next time they need a temporary place to stay. Amanda made one final attempt, cornering me in Emma's half-restored room. You've ruined everything, she hissed. Our business plans, our dreams. No, Amanda, you ruined everything when you decided your dreams were more important than my children's well-being. I gestured to the water damage on the basement ceiling below. You were willing to make them sick for your spa fantasy. We would have fixed the basement eventually, she protested. With what money? The fraudulent loan? The credit cards you stole from your son? Or maybe with the profits from your non-existent business? She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the remaining crystals she hadn't packed yet. By evening, the house was quiet again. Emma and Jack inspected their restored rooms, though it would take time to erase all traces of Amanda's improvements. The walls needed repainting and the floors had some damage from the equipment, but at least they were home. Next time, Mark said as we got ready for bed that night, I'll stand up to them sooner. I'm sorry it took me so long to see what they were doing. I nodded, accepting his apology but knowing we still had work to do. The trust they'd broken wouldn't be repaired overnight. A week later, we received a letter from the bank's fraud department. Amanda and George were being investigated for multiple instances of financial fraud across 3 states. Their pattern of wellness businesses had left a trail of debt and betrayal. What happens to them now? Mark asked after reading the letter. They face the consequences of their actions, I replied, just like they should have years ago. Emma and Jack settled back into their rooms, though Emma insisted on burning sage in every corner. A bit of wellness wisdom she'd ironically learned from her grandmother. We fixed the basement, painted the walls in colors they chose, and made their spaces truly theirs again. 6 months later, we heard through family that Amanda and George had moved to yet another state, probably planning their next scheme. But they wouldn't find any more victims in our home. Mark installed new locks and security cameras, not because we expected them to return, but because he finally understood the importance of protecting our family, not just from strangers, but sometimes from the people who should care about us most. As I tucked Emma into bed one night in her room that was once again filled with her books and treasures instead of meditation cushions, she asked, "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa will ever change?" I smoothed her hair back, thinking carefully before answering. People only change when they want to, sweetie. Our job isn't to change them. It's to protect ourselves and each other. She nodded wisely. Like you protected us. Exactly like that, I replied, turning on her nightlight, the same one Amanda had called too childish for her spa aesthetic. The light cast warm, familiar shadows on the walls, and my daughter drifted off to sleep in her own room, safe and secure. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are against the people who claim to love us most. But standing firm and protecting what matters, that's what real family does.